Frank Lucas walked into Bumpy Johnson's funeral with $100,000 cash. What he did next made every mobster in Harlem stop and pay attention. Chapter 1. The day Harlem's king died, July 7, 1968, at exactly 6:47 a.m., Frank Lucas got the call. He's gone, just 2 words. That's all it took. Bumpy Johnson, the most feared and respected black gangster in American history, was dead. A heart attack out of nowhere. No warning. No goodbye. Just gone. Frank dropped the phone. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly. His boss, his mentor, the man who had been like a father to him, gone at just 62. For 15 years. Bumpy had been Frank's entire world. He taught him the rules. Taught him how to think, how to move, how to survive in a system that didn't want men like him to win. Now, Bumpy was gone. Frank's wife, Eva, gently touched his shoulder. "Baby, what's wrong?" "Bumpy's dead," she gasped. "Oh God, Frank, I'm so sorry." But Frank didn't hear her. His mind was already racing, calculating, because Frank Lucas understood something no one else in Harlem had realized. Yet, when a king dies, there's always a war for the throne. And Bumpy Johnson's throne was worth $50 million a year in heroin, protection, and street respect. Every serious mobster in New York was going to be at that funeral. Italians, Irish, Chinese, all of them circling like sharks, trying to figure out who'd take over Harlem now, and they all assumed it would be one of them. Someone white, connected, backed by an army. They weren't even thinking about Frank Lucas. To them, Frank was just Bumpy's driver. The guy who picked up his dry cleaning and carried his bags. No one saw him as a threat. That was about to change. Frank stood up and started getting dressed. Eva watched him. "Where are you going?" "To the bank." "The bank?" "Baby, it's not even 7 a.m. I need to take out some money." "How much?" Frank looked at her. "All of it." 3 hours later, Frank walked out of Chase Manhattan Bank, holding a briefcase with $100,000 in cash. That's about $800,000 today. Every dollar he'd ever saved working under Bumpy. His entire life savings. Eva was waiting in the car. "Frank, what are you doing?" "I'm going to Bumpy's funeral." "With $100,000 in cash. Are you insane? Someone could rob you. Kill you." Frank looked her in the eye. "Baby, I'm about to walk into a room full of killers and legends. If I walk in there, I'm walking in like a king. Not Bumpy's errand boy, a king. Frank, trust me." The funeral was at Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, the biggest church in the neighborhood. Big enough to hold 2,000 people. And it was packed. Standing room only. Every seat filled with gangsters, politicians, community leaders. People who owed Bumpy. People who feared him. People who loved him. And up front, dressed in their finest suits, sat the mobsters. Frank saw all of them. Carmon from the Lucchese family, Joe Colombo, Crazy Joe Gallo, Nicky Barnes and his crew, Italians, black gangsters, everyone pretending to mourn while calculating who'd take Bumpy's empire. Frank walked in late, on purpose. Black suit, black tie, black fedora, briefcase and hand. Heads turned. "Isn't that Bumpy's driver?" Then they looked away. Frank didn't sit. He walked straight to the front of the church, to Bumpy's casket. Set the briefcase down. Opened it. If this story already has you hooked, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because what Frank did next, you've never heard anything like it. Frank reached in and pulled out a stack of $100 bills. $10,000. He placed it on Bumpy's chest. The church went dead silent. Frank pulled out another stack. $10,000. Then another. And another. 10 stacks total. $100,000 in cash. Laying on top of Bumpy Johnson's body, the place froze. Frank. Lucas, the nobody driver, had just put 100 grand into a dead man's casket. In front of 2,000 people. And then? He turned around to face them all. My name is Frank Lucas. I worked for Bumpy Johnson for 15 years. And the one thing he always told me, he said, Frank, in this life you're either somebody or you're nobody. And the only way people know you're somebody is if you show them. Frank gestured to the casket. To the money. Bumpy Johnson was somebody, the biggest somebody Harlem ever had. And when a king dies, you don't bury him broke. You send him off like royalty. That's what I'm doing. I'm sending my king off with $100,000 because that's what respect looks like. Still, silence. Frank continued. Now I know what all of you are thinking. Who's going to run Harlem now? Who takes over Bumpy's operation? You think it's going to be one of you. He pointed at the Italians. You think it's going to be you? He pointed at Nicky Barnes and the others. You think you're next? Frank shook his head. You're all wrong. Because Bumpy didn't leave this empire to any of you. He left it to me. The church erupted, shouting. Chairs moving. Mobsters standing up. Nicky Barnes jumped out of his seat. You're nobody. You were just a driver. Frank didn't flinch. I was a driver. Now, I'm the king. Because I just put $100,000 in Bumpy's casket in front of all of you, and none of you can say the same. Frank's voice echoed, calm, unshaken. Not one of you has that kind of money to spare. Not one of you showed that kind of respect. You came to watch a king go in the ground, and I'm the only one who sent him off like royalty. Then Frank locked eyes with Carmen Tronti. You Italians have been taxing Harlem for 50 years, taking a cut of everything we earn, like we're just part of your operation. He shook his head. That ends today. Harlem belongs to Harlem now. You want to do business here? You come to me. You ask permission. You pay me. Tronti's face turned red. You got some nerve, kid. Frank didn't blink. I've got $100,000 in that casket that says I've got more than nerve. I've got loyalty. I've got vision. I've got respect. 3 things none of you seem to understand. Frank turned toward Nicky Barnes. And? You've been waiting for Bumpy to die so you could slide in, take the crown. But you don't have what it takes. You want to shine. You want headlines. You want everybody saying your name. That's how you get locked up. That's how you get buried. Frank's voice lowered. I'm going to do things differently. Quiet, smart, and rich. And 5 years from now, when I'm making $1 million a day, you're going to wish you'd shown me respect today. The church was chaos. Now people yelling, mobsters shouting. Tension rising like smoke, but Frank didn't care, because he'd already won. He had done what no one saw coming. Walked into a funeral full of killers, claimed the throne, and backed it with $100,000 cash. He turned back to the casket. Rest easy, boss. I'm gonna make you proud. I'm gonna take everything you taught me and build something so strong, so powerful, that 50 years from now, they'll still be telling stories about Frank Lucas. Then he walked out. All eyes followed him. Every mobster in the room trying to decide, kill him or respect him. If you can't believe what Frank just pulled off, smash that like button, because this is just the beginning of the wildest power move in Mafia history. Chapter 2, The Aftermath. Frank Lucas stepped out of Abyssinian Baptist Church and into the sunlight. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline. He had just pulled off the boldest move in Harlem's criminal history, claimed a whole empire. In public. Put $100,000 in a casket to prove he was real. And stared down the Italian Mafia without flinching. Eva was in the driver's seat, frozen. Frank, what did you just do? Frank lit a cigarette. I just became king of Harlem. Her voice cracked. No, you just signed your death warrant. The Italians? They'll come after you? Nicky Barnes? He'll come after you. Every man in that church wants your head now. Frank exhaled. Calm, maybe, but they're not doing it today. You know why? Because I just dropped $100,000 like it was nothing, and now every one of them is wondering. If Frank can throw that kind of money away, how much does he really have? How connected is he? How dangerous is he? Ava stared at him. You're crazy. No, I'm strategic. Bumpy taught me this. Make a move so bold they can't tell if it's genius or suicide. And while they're trying to decide, you take power. And what if they decide you're stupid? Then I die. But at least I die as somebody. Not just Bumpy's driver. They drove in silence back to Frank's apartment. When they walked in, the phone was already ringing. Frank picked it up. Yeah, Frank Lucas. The voice was thick with an Italian accent. Who is this? This is Carmen Tronti. We need to talk. Frank's chest tightened. Carmine Tronti, acting boss of the Lucchese crime family. One of the 5 families running New York. If Tronti wanted to talk, it meant one of 2 things. A deal. Or a death sentence. Talk, Frank said. Not on the phone. Meet me at Ralph's restaurant. Tonight, 8 o'clock, alone. Click. The line went dead. Eva looked at him. Who was that? The Mafia. They want to meet. Are you going? Frank nodded. I have to. If I don't show, I look weak. If I look weak, I'm already dead. Frank. I know, baby. I know. That night, Frank walked into Ralph's restaurant in East Harlem. Small place, 10 tables. But it was the most exclusive spot in the city. No one ate there unless they were connected. Tonight, it was cleared out. 1 table. Carmen Tronti sat there with 4 bodyguards. Frank walked over, calm and quiet. Sat down. Tronti studied him. You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that. I learned from the best, Frank said. Bumpy was smart. You? Tronti smirked, still figuring that out. Could be smart or suicidal. We'll see. He poured 2 glasses of wine. Here's the deal. Bumpy had an arrangement with us. He ran Harlem. We took 20%. Everybody was happy. Now Bumpy's gone. And you're saying that deal is over. That's a problem. Frank leaned in. It's only a problem if you make it one. Tronti's eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? I'm stating facts. Harlem is mine now. I'm not paying you 20%. I'm not paying anything. But I'm not your enemy either. I'm not expanding into your turf. I'm not touching your operations. I just want what's mine. Tronti squinted. And what makes you think you can hold Harlem without us? Frank didn't flinch. Because I have something. You don't. I have the people. Harlem trusts me. They knew Bumpy. They saw me work for him. They saw me put $100,000 in his casket out of respect. You think you can walk in and take that from me? They'll fight you. They'll burn the whole place down before they let you run it. But me? They'll work with me. Because I'm one of them. Tronti leaned back, thinking. And that money? That $100,000 you threw away. Where'd you get it? I saved it. 15 years under Bumpy. No cars. No women. No jewelry. I saved every dollar because I knew one day I'd need it. Today was that day. So, you're broke now? Frank looked at Carmen Tronti. I'm invested. There's a difference. Tronti grinned. You're smarter than I thought. All right, he said. Here's what I'll do. I'll give you 6 months. 6 months to show you can run Harlem without us. If you hold your ground, keep order, and turn a profit, we'll respect that. But if it falls apart, if there's chaos, If your people turn on you, if you can't pay, we're stepping in and we're taking everything." Frank nodded, extended his hand. "Deal." They shook on it. It wasn't a partnership, it was a deadline. Frank had just earned a temporary peace with the Mafia, but he knew they weren't rooting for him. They were counting on him to fail, betting that without Bumpy, he was just a shadow with a briefcase. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Drop a comment if you think Frank's got what it takes, because what he does next rewrites the rules of organized crime forever. Chapter 3. Building an empire. Frank Lucas stepped out of Ralph's restaurant alone. Step 1. Survive the meeting. Step 2. Actually take Harlem. And that would be a lot harder, because to most of Harlem's underworld, Frank was still the driver, the guy who held the door and ran errands. Nobody believed he was running things now. And Nicky Barnes was the first to test him. 3 days after Bumpy's funeral, Nicky walked into one of Frank's spots on 145th Street, told Frank's dealers they worked for him now, said Frank was finished, said the real players were stepping in. When Frank found out, he didn't lose his temper. He made a plan. That night, he walked straight to Nicky Barnes' apartment and knocked on the door. Nicky opened it, surprised. "Frank?" What the? Frank pulled out a pistol, pressed it to Nicky's forehead. "You've got 2 choices," Frank said calmly. "1, you work for me. I'll make you my lieutenant. You'll get paid. You'll be respected. You'll be my right hand. Or 2, I pull this trigger. And every dealer in Harlem learns what happens when you cross Frank Lucas." Nicky stared. "You're bluffing." Frank didn't flinch. "I just put $100,000 in a dead man's casket. You think I'm scared to put a bullet in a live one?" The silence stretched. Frank pulled the hammer back. The click was sharp. "Choose?" Nicky swallowed. Okay. I'll work for you." Frank lowered the gun. "Smart. Because here's what you don't get, Nicky. I don't want fame. I don't need my name in the streets. I want money. And you want to be a star. So here's the deal. You'll be the face, the legend, Mr. Untouchable. I'll be the supplier, the shadow. You get the glory. I get the cash. Everybody wins." Nicky thought about it, nodded. "That could work." "It will work," Frank said, "because I'm smarter than you and you're flashier than me. Together, we're a perfect match." That meeting changed everything. Nicky Barnes became the figurehead, the gangster everybody talked about. Meanwhile, Frank stayed invisible. No one knew where his heroin came from. No one knew how he moved it. No one knew how much he was making, and that's exactly how Frank liked it. But he still had a problem. The heroin from the Italians was expensive and weak. They bought it from the Corsican Mafia in France, marked it up, and sold it to Harlem at outrageous prices. Frank was paying $50,000 per kilo for heroin that was only 10% pure. By the time it hit the streets, it was cut so many times it was practically useless. Frank needed a better source. So he did something no American dealer had ever done. He went straight to the source. In 1969, Frank flew to Bangkok, Thailand, then deeper into the jungles of Vietnam. The Golden Triangle, where the world's opium came from. He met directly with Thai and Chinese producers, negotiated face to face, cut out all the middlemen, the Corsicans, the Italians, everyone, and he struck a deal. Pure heroin, 95% pure. $4,000 per kilo. Not $50,000. Then Frank found a way to move it. He smuggled the heroin into the U.S. hidden inside coffins of dead American soldiers coming home from Vietnam. The military didn't inspect them. They were sealed. Sacred. Frank paid off a few supply sergeants. And just like that, he had a pipeline nobody could touch. His first shipment hit New York. He called it Blue Magic. It was blue, And it was pure. The Italian's product was 10% pure. Blue Magic was 95%. Frank could cut it 9 times and still have better stuff than anyone else. And because he bought cheap and sold smart, he undercut every dealer in the city and still made 10 times the profit. Within 6 months, Frank controlled 80% of Harlem's heroin trade. He was making $1 million a day. He had 250 people working for him, owned properties, businesses, fleets of cars. He was richer than the Mafia, and they had no clue how. Carmen Tronti called Frank back to Ralph's restaurant. "How are you doing this?" "Doing what?" Frank said. "This money, this product. We've been in this game for 50 years, and we can't figure you out." Frank smiled. "That's because you're thinking like Italians. I'm thinking like a businessman. You want to know the secret? I don't have partners. I have employees. Everyone works for me. No one gets a cut. No one gets power. Just a salary. That way, no one can betray me. No one can take over. I'm the only one who knows how it works." Tronti leaned back. "You're smarter then." "Bumpy. He taught me well. So what now? You gonna expand? Try to take Brooklyn? Queens?" Frank shook his head. "No, I'm staying right here. Quiet, focused, making money. I don't want to be John Gotti. I don't want fame. I want wealth. There's a difference." Tronte nodded slowly. "Smart." Frank didn't say the rest. He wasn't staying small because he was humble. He was staying small because he was strategic. The bigger you get, the more attention you draw, and attention? That's what gets you arrested, or worse. Frank Lucas didn't want to be a celebrity. He wanted to make his money and disappear. He'd seen Bumpy Johnson die broke. Seen other gangsters die in prison. Frank was going to be different. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see how this empire ends, because Frank's about to make the one mistake that costs him everything. Chapter 4. One mistake for 5 years. Frank Lucas was untouchable. From 1969 to 1974, he made over $100 million. He owned buildings in Harlem, homes in New Jersey, expensive cars, private cash businesses. He lived like royalty, but stayed low. No headlines. No noise. The feds knew his name, but they couldn't pin anything on him. They watched the Italians, the Corsicans, the parts, but Frank's supply line? Invisible. And that invisibility kept him safe. Then came the mistake, March 8, 1971. Alley. V.S. Frazier. The fight of the century. Madison Square Garden. The biggest sporting event in America. Every celebrity was there. Every gangster. Every politician. And Frank? He had a ringside seat, but what he wore, that's what changed everything. A full-length chinchilla coat. Real fur, $50,000 price tag. Flashy, loud, impossible to miss. It screamed, "I'm rich. Look at me." Frank sat front row with his wife, laughing, relaxed. And across the arena, a detective named Richie Roberts was watching. Richie was with the Essex County Prosecutor's Office. He specialized in drug investigations. For 2 years he'd been hearing about Frank Lucas, a quiet man, no arrests, no confirmed business ties, just whispers. But when Richie saw Frank sitting front row in that coat, he knew that wasn't normal. Money. Nobody wears a $50,000 coat to a boxing match unless they're trying to be seen. And nobody that rich stays clean. That coat? That was the beginning of the end. The next day, Richie Roberts started building a case. He watched Frank's crew, tracked his movements, studied the money trail. Piece by piece, year by year, the case came together, and in 1975, Richie and the D raided Frank's home in Teaneck, New Jersey. They found $584,000 in cash, heroin, ledgers, records, evidence, Frank Lucas was arrested. Facing life in prison, sitting in a cold jail cell, Frank remembered something Bumpy once told him. "Frank, the moment you want people to know you're rich, you're finished. Stay invisible. Stay quiet. The silent man lives. The loud man dies." For 5 years, Frank had stayed silent. Made $100 million. Built a quiet empire. Then he wore a chinchilla coat to a boxing match. And that one moment of pride cost him everything. But Frank still had one move left. He picked up the phone, called Richie Roberts. "I want to talk." "About what?" "Hi. Want to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "I'll tell you everything. The entire operation. The mafia. The cops. The supply chain. Everything. But I want reduced time." Richie paused. "How many people are we talking about?" "Over 100, Frank said. "Cops, dealers, the whole ring. It would be the biggest corruption case in New York history." Richie agreed. And Frank Lucas became an informant. He testified. Against the mafia. Against dirty NYPD detectives. Against the French Connection heroin pipeline. His testimony led to more than 100 arrests, including dozens of crooked cops. The NYPD's Special Investigations Unit, once the most feared team in the city, was wiped out. Frank was sentenced to 70 years, but because of his cooperation, it was reduced to 15. He served 7. And in 1981, Frank Lucas walked out of prison, but the world was different. The streets were colder. The game was meaner. The crack epidemic was just beginning. And Frank? He was a legend, but yesterday's legend. He tried to stay clean, talk to kids. Spoke at schools. In 2007, he worked as a consultant for the movie American Gangster, where Denzel Washington played him. Frank Lucas died in 2019 at 88 years old, natural causes. In his sleep, and people still argue, was Frank a villain? Or was he a visionary? Truth is, he was both. Frank brought poison into his own community, built his fortune on destruction, but he also proved that a frail black man from North Carolina with nothing could outsmart the mafia, take the throne, and build something massive. Bumpy Johnson's funeral was the moment Frank Lucas stepped out of the shadows. That $100,000 in the casket wasn't just a tribute. It was a message. It said, "I'm here, I'm next." And 50 years later, people are still talking about it. Leave a comment. Was Frank Lucas a genius? Or did that chinchilla coat prove he was just another gangster who got too cocky? Because that's the question people still debate. In an old interview, Frank once said, "Bumpy taught me, you can't be half a gangster. You either go all the way or you don't go at all." I went all the way. And yeah, I paid for it. But at least I got to be somebody. At least for a while I was king. Frank Lucas taught us something about power. Real power isn't loud. Real power is quiet. The moment you need people to see your power, you've already lost it. Frank stayed quiet for 5 years and became one of the richest criminals in America. Then he got loud and lost everything. But here's what nobody talks about. That $100,000 in Bumpy's casket, Frank never regretted it. Years later, in prison, someone asked, "Don't you wish you kept that money? You could have used it for lawyers. Your family." Frank just shook his head. "No, that money bought something more valuable. It bought me respect. It bought me a name. It bought me a throne. For 5 years I was king of Harlem, and you can't put a price on that." Hit that like button if this story taught you something about respect, power, and the price of both, because that's what Frank's story was really about. Not the money, not the drugs, the respect, and what it cost to earn it. Subscribe if you want more untold stories about the people who changed history by refusing to play by the rules, because Frank didn't just break the rules. He rewrote them, Rest in peace, Frank Lucas. 1930 to 2019. The man who walked into a church with $100,000 and walked out a king. The man who proved the boldest move can be the smartest one. And the man who taught us staying invisible is harder than being famous. But it's what keeps you alive. Frank Lucas is gone. But the legend of that funeral, that $100,000, that legend lives forever. The end.